Now we're going back to square one, making fire.
So I've got two identities, right? I've got the identity of a teacher imagining how I'm going to teach this. Your job is to make sure that the people in your country can eat, right? It's a very basic human need.
Prof, greetings. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Great to have you on the show. We've been meaning to have you on BTH. Finally, we're here. How are things going? How is the academic life treating you currently?
Good. I'm very happy in what I do. They pay me too much, and I absolutely love what I'm doing, whether it's teaching at high school in the morning or doing research on universities and schools in the afternoon, trying to inspire people in communities at night. Yeah, I'm living my best life.
I love that. I love that. You don't get so many academics saying that they appreciate what it is that they do nowadays. Usually it is by chance that people would still be at varsities, especially after being there for a prolonged period. In 3 to 5 years, people will tell you we're actually going to go to industry. And I don't know why that is. Maybe you could shed some light. Is the academic environment a toxic space that people would want to come in and out?
No, I don't think so. I mean, the thing is about teaching and research, you must love it.
Yeah.
It must be a vocation for you, calling. It must be, the night before I teach, whether it's at university or at school, I can't sleep. I am so excited about the opportunity to teach other people's children or adults or whatever.
Yeah.
I would spend hours preparing a 50-minute lecture because I want to make it interesting. I want to make it digestible. I want to make it the best in the world. So I come to my work as an academic over many years, or before that as a school teacher, with a sense of enjoyment, a sense of thrill.
Yeah.
I never teach the same thing 2 years in a row, So when people walk around with long faces, complaining about everything under the sun, from the air conditioning to the parking to the dean, I say, then sell insurance, do something else with your life.
Yeah.
But why must you subject yourself, to the to an unpleasant space? No, and I think you'll find that both in schools and in universities, in the education space, that when people are passionate about what they do, and they love the engagement with young minds, and they love doing research and putting up books and pushing, the envelope when it comes to innovation and technology. It's the best job in the world.
And Prof, while you're there, I'm just wondering, you're saying that you spend hours preparing for lectures. And in my mind, I'm like, I wonder how many lectures Prof has in a week. Because I can imagine some people they have to teach 4 days in a row. So one may ask, how possible is it to spend hours preparing for the lesson and also doing your own research? Because academics are expected to conduct research.
Yeah, so it's a habit, right? So when I was a high school teacher, for example, I taught 8 periods a day or 7 periods a day. I would spend all my weekends, all my holidays, all my spare time imagining how I'm going to teach this lecture. But those days I used textbooks and materials and museums, a science teacher.
Yeah.
Now you can go on YouTube, and get hundreds of videos and choose the best among them and then adapt them to your style and your preference. So, so I've always worked hard in the sense of preparing in order to teach, whether I taught at high school, whether I taught 3 lectures a day at university and supervised students and mentor young academics and do all of this stuff. I fit it in because I love what I do.
And do you find that to be true for the guys that you mentioned now? Are they able to do what you do as well?
Some. There are those who don't quite know how to do that.
Yeah.
And so I spend a lot of time, I write books about it, by the way, about how you can choose what is important to you and how you can ignore the things that distract you. So I spend a lot of time telling people about how to do that. And to never forget that at the end of the day, as a teacher, your primary service is to students.
Yeah.
As a researcher, you have a responsibility, obviously, to the academic community, but also to the broader public. So whether you're doing research in immunology or doing research in curriculum theory, try and do it in a way that can speak to many publics, and not just the journal editor, right? And it takes a while to get there. And for those who really want to do that, it happens. And once you're in your group, as a young academic, or as in my case, as a older academic, you can't be happier.
Yeah.
You really can't be happier. So I could go from this morning, for example, working in a school, teaching a class in the crepe cycle to grade 11s, and aerobic respiration. Then I can do a book launch with the community in Belhar, which I just did now. Okay. Then I come here and do a high-level seminar with some of the top scholars and scientists in the country. I just did that now on the geopolitical crisis and what that means for science and so on. And then I can go to you. And then after this, I can run a seminar with my postdocs. And then after that, tonight I have one of my research teams in California. We will be talking about design issues. I mean, can you imagine a better life than that?
It sounds overwhelming, but it tells me something about you. It tells me how structured you are. It tells me how organized you are as well. So that means you are able to manage your time efficiently, which is something that most people struggle with, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, I think most people do struggle with juggling balls and all of that. And, when you're younger, you also have children, when you have family and all that. I get that. But again, you've got to know yourself first. And once you know yourself, you know what rhythms work for you and what don't. For example, I'm a night person, but I'm also a morning person. So I can work till midnight. And I can get up at 4, 5, or 6 and start again. Others can't do that. Some just can work in the mornings early when their minds are fresh. Others prefer to be night owls. You need to find out what works for you. Some of my friends are very productive researchers. They believe in doing a cat nap in the afternoon. So
That's me.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that, right? The whole idea is to figure out, how does my physiology work? How does my body work? How does my mind work? When am I at my best, right? Same as true in sports. You take a bunch of rugby players. Each one of those 50 rugby players in our World Cup team have a different mojo. They have different, some are married, some are single, some are, you've got to figure out what works for you. And once you do that, the rest is easy.
You mentioned something interesting, and I wanted to bring it into the conversation. So I'm glad you've introduced it a bit. You spoke about you teaching. I didn't know you were a teacher before. I've read so many of your articles actually, and your op-eds, but it never occurred to me that you were once a school teacher.
Oh yeah. No, I think most people know that who know me. That I started off wanting to be in a rural area. And not in Cape Town, so I went to Vredenburg, got a job there as high school science teacher, biology they called it those days. Then I went to Trafalgar High School, taught senior biology there, and it's still my first love. And I love university teaching, don't get me wrong, but to be able to step into a class with a bunch of young kids and see the lights go on in their minds as they start to understand, a particular concept, they can't pay you for that. They can't pay you for that. And you know that young person's going to remember that. I mean, to this day, like today, I get people, I don't remember them anymore. You know, I remember how you taught me gravity standing on your head in the class. Of course, I don't do that anymore. But it's the impact you leave, you know, over generations of students. Now I can do it through teacher education students or through principals of schools that I work with, and so on and so forth. So, no, I absolutely love teaching. I love doing research. I love doing community, development, and so it's not difficult for me to think about these things, but I do prepare myself thoroughly out of respect for the people I work with.
You remind me of a paragraph I read when I was reading your book, Breaking Bread.
Bread, yeah.
Yes, Breaking Bread. Where there was this school learner. You still teach in schools, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how you do it. Where there was this learner whom you greeted. I think you were greeting many of them, and she didn't respond, and then said something like, "I don't even greet my own mother. Who does he think he is?" But what happens when you come across such learners? What do you do in those instances?
So I've got two identities, right? I got the identity of a teacher, a researcher, that kind of thing, but I also have the identity of a social scientist, right? So when the student walked past me, a friend greeted, she didn't greet. And behind my back, she says in Afrikaans, I didn't greet my parents, my mother. It doesn't offend me at all. It's an opportunity for me to think. So I say, my goodness me, how is it possible in this Cape Flats community where I'm working in the mornings that you can wake up in your home in Capito or Lavendale or Capricorn and not greet your parents? My mother will kill me, in my head. Okay. Why is this? And then I begin to understand that this child is not joking, right? And then I understand why my insistence on what would otherwise be normal behavior, like greet your teachers, stand up when the principal comes into the room, make sure your books are covered, that those are unreasonable expectations if where the children come from. They're just trying to survive from day to day. Right. Father's in prison, mother's a tickle, granny raises them. I have to be empathetic. I have to be supportive. I have to, as I often do, especially with the boys, put my arm around there and say, you are a really smart kid. If you can just deal with this attention deficit, with this need to be the class clown, you're going to make a really good student. Do you know what? 9 out of 10 for kid changes. So for me, what happened in that particular case is an opportunity for understanding. Okay, not an immature response. It's just, come here, who the,
Yeah, because when you go to schools and you find rebellious learners, teachers would then say, it's okay, it's your future, and you're gonna live it like that. Or they would say, in isiZulu, they would say, "Samba nabahamba," meaning we'll proceed with those who are willing to actually walk the journey. And they would leave the likes of the girl that he interacted with like that. They would not probe and look further and try to find ways of assisting them. But what does then that mean about the caliber of teachers that you have in our schools?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't blame the teacher in those cases. I'll tell you why. When you're dealing with 50 kids in a class, in Amazondoti or in Burundi or in KwaZulu, you don't have time. Okay, to regulate the behavior of every single child. Yeah. You're tired, you're exhausted. And the more kids like that, the more difficult it is for you. So the responses that I've seen are actually many. So one response, I love that, the way you express that in Susan. The one response is, I'll leave you in the hands of the Lord. Okay, I've seen that, right? Because if you attend to every one of those kids, you're going to go mad, right? The other response is to take the kid and sort of say, listen, what do you think you're doing? Okay? Yeah. That's going to end badly for both you and the kid, right? So I've seen that too.
Yeah.
And the other response is to say, hey, see me after school, let's chat. I do a lot of that these days at this high school. And so on and so forth. So I've seen the range of responses, but teachers have limited resources, limited emotional resources, limited pedagogical resources, teaching resources, limited time, And so the notion that there will be one response is very good. If you teach in a fancy school in the southern suburbs, of course you can send the kid to the school counselor and they sit on a soft cushion and they get ice cream. We talk about behavior modification. I don't want to work in schools like that. I want to work in schools where kids really struggle.
Yeah.
And see them turn around. But I wasn't always like that. I think as a young teacher I was fiery. My nickname in Afrikaans in this Afrikaans school was Tier, which means tiger. I took no nonsense, Other teachers used to send the kids to me to sort them out, I'm embarrassed about it, right? But as a young teacher, that's all I knew, is how to be the tough guy. And you realize as you grow older, of course, that it's not about you, actually. It's about these children, and they come from very difficult circumstances. And you're smarter than them.
Yeah.
And therefore, if you can't change their behavior with your head, you should not try and change it with your hands.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so corporal punishment is a no-no. You support that?
I do. I think it's ridiculous. I mean, why beat? I mean, I got beaten if you've seen my book Breaking Bread. Every auntie, every uncle, every teacher is beaten.
Yeah.
A lot of you for no particular reason. It's very embarrassing. It's very humiliating. It's very unproductive because, I have to beat you every day then. So it doesn't change anything at all. But I don't want to pretend I'm an angel. As I said, when I started my career, I very much did those kinds of things which I'm not proud of.
Prof, you then mention the challenges that exist within the school system. And I often ask myself again one question: why is it that in higher education, almost all universities, in fact, all universities have psychologists, they have counselors, but in schools we don't see those? Are we not supposed to have them for the benefits of both teachers and learners?
Universities can afford that, right? Poor and working class schools cannot afford that. Middle class, wealthy schools have those things because they can charge parents 100,000 rand. I'm not making this, in fees per year. In fact, it's sometimes even more expensive than sending your kid to university. So of course you can buy a physiotherapist, you can have an aquatic club, you can have psychologists and so on. But in the schools where I work at the moment, the kid can't even get to the dentist. So I literally take them to the dentist, like this week, And the dentist, because they know what I'm doing, give it to me for free. Then I go to the chemist and they give me the antibiotics and the pain tablets for almost nothing. So my point is, and this is sad to say, under apartheid, we actually had dental care and people would check your eyesight once a year. After apartheid.
In school?
Yes.
Oh.
No, I remember very clearly. Once a year, somebody comes, open your mouth. And somebody would come and sort of say, that's how you discovered in those days that the reason this kid is sitting against the board is they can't see.
Yeah.
Right? That was under apartheid. We got soup and we got milk. Milk on Monday and Friday, soup Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Nobody went hungry. Right? Today, everybody steals the food under the school nutrition program. There is no dentist. There is no what's new. And so it is bizarre to me, that but yeah, so when people talk in idealistic terms, of course there should be somebody who comes and gives counseling to teachers who are burnt out very often, and takes a kid who just saw his father killed in front of him in Lavendale and makes sure that we don't give counseling. It's like this kid must just get on with them, right? What I'm pointing to is the very deep inequalities not just in the social system broadly, but in the school system in particular. How people live with that, God alone knows, because I can't sleep at night. You know, when I realize that my kids, simply because I'm now middle class, can get all of these privileges, and other people who look like me can't. I can't tell you how it disturbs me. And so I literally give away half of my salary every month just to make sure a kid can study while they wait for the NSFAS money, or a child can get a calculator, you know, that kind of thing. It's a joy to do it. And my wife and I have done this many years. But it's an inadequate way of responding to the failures of the government.
Yeah, yeah. Still staying on, by the way, that's very nice. I wish many senior officials in universities that can afford to do that could do it. I say this because in the many or a couple of universities I've been to, if I put this in the context of food, if you look at student hunger, you would get your senior officials saying, let us come up with initiatives of supporting your disadvantaged students, but then they themselves would not make contributions. You know, so those that have the means, I wish they could do what you're doing. But still staying on counselors and psychologists, do you then think that it wouldn't be just for district officers to have those services in case they are needed in the immediate schools?
Yeah, I think, it would be ideal if we are very efficient district officers, so that when a kid falls and bleeds, they will be seen within an hour. That'd be nice. But we know the setup. People in poorer communities have to wait for hours and hours and hours, and then often get substandard treatment.
Yeah.
And so the problem doesn't quite get resolved, and then they have to come back the next day and miss school and miss work, and therefore pay. This is the reality we live with, right? And so at the school I work with, I sort of say, I acknowledge the system is broken. What can we do? And I reach out to my friends, both at the university. The university has been very supportive, but also online, Facebook, Twitter. And I get everybody a calculator, or I get everybody a textbook, or that kind of thing, But it's not sustainable, and it's not systemic.
Yeah.
There's 24,000 schools in the country, right? You can't only survive through the goodwill of individuals. Yeah. You need a government. But you can sit on your hands and wait for this government to actually do a real budget payment, right? But you will wait until Jesus comes. It's not gonna happen. Yeah. People are so into themselves. Yeah. And their own interests and their own children and their own homes. So
from what I could hear earlier, it sounded as if historically everything was in place. If you look at the design of the school system as compared to now. And I'm sitting here wondering what it is that our current government could learn from
the past.
The apartheid government.
Yeah, look, the apartheid government was evil. Let's just get that off the table.
Yeah,
right? And discriminated as a matter of policy. Etc. So I don't want to.
Yeah.
But have you ever read Jacob Lamini's book, Native Nostalgia?
Native Nostalgia?
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
You must read it. It's a very courageous book. He's now a professor at Princeton. But he was writing about people like his mother who actually missed some of the positive things.
Oh, that's my grandfather.
Under apartheid. Now, of course, when you hear that, as an angry generation of young people, you say, think, right? You could actually walk down our street where I live, growing up, without fearing for your life. You know what I mean? You could you could go to the clinic and somebody would see you. Yeah, it'd still take 2 hours, but somebody would see you and help you deliver your baby. You could. I remember things working. All right. Now people are literally stealing the robots out of the ground in Johannesburg. Have you seen that?
I have.
And you see these Tsotsis running off with even run anymore. Why run this? Why run? Right? I mean, we're eating ourselves up.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you look at inner city Johannesburg, for example, I mean, I used to love going to the Carlton Centre. It was beautiful. You could see Joburg from the top there. The moment we took over as black people, okay, the whole place, I mean, they had a bombing from underground because they're not maintaining their pipes, okay, etc. And you run Joburg into the ground, and you steal all the money through PRASA for the train system. You bankrupt SABC over and over again. You bankrupt the National Airline over and over again. Right? You can't help people. Right? And the school system. This is the only country where people died for education. Yeah. Not for healthcare, not for waterworks, for education. And we give our young people this kind of microwave bunty education all over again. No. It's unacceptable.
Staying on governance, what do you think is the problem? Why are we experiencing so much corruption, especially from people that on a daily basis, when they stand in front of people, they publicly claim that they actually fought for liberation so that people could have a better livelihood?
Look, it's a deep question. It's a very profound question. And I've asked that question from my mentors, from people like Devaluing, who's a very wise man, from people like Rebellious, from people like Neville Alexander, I still ask them those kind of questions. And the only thing I can come up with, right, is that in the cause of our long oppression under colonialism and apartheid, it squashed our humanity. It's not normal for people to do that. What mother steals the food out of her baby's mouth? What mother does? Right? It's not normal. Okay, but we were so devalued and debased, right? Imagine your father working in the mines in Johannesburg. I can show you the photos. An African men had to line up, and they would be showered, okay? And there would be, people probing into their anuses to see whether they carrying contraband and so on and so forth. You do that over decades. Do you really expect people to be normal? Right? So we are more traumatized than we think. And this notion that everyone must just wake up one day and be good people is ridiculous. Do you know what I'm saying? And so I think we haven't accounted for the psychosocial, emotional, effects of both colonialism and apartheid on us. Is that an excuse? No. But is that the reality? Yes. Okay. And so you look at Lavendale, for example, where the school is near where those people all lived in District 6. They lived in their own homes in Constantia. And they were forcibly removed and put there. What do? You begin to feed off each other. Yeah. Etc. So I'm not unaware, as a social scientist, of that kind of degradation of the human spirit. Right? And then you put in place where things were really went south, was when Jacob Zuma became president, because he then made it official that it was okay to steal on an industrial scale. Yeah. He made that official. State capture made that official. So anytime you put billions of rand available in an entity like NSFAS, for example, it will never work. Because the people see that as something that they can feast on. You with me? Yeah. Now, this does not mean, as you probably know, I hope I don't have to teach you this, that white people were not corrupt. My God. Just in my field, in education, the whole textbook industry was corrupted by white people. Afrikaners read all of those textbooks for schools so that they become mega rich. Remember the Moldenhead scandal. Remember every single other scandal. This is not black people's problem. Yeah. This is what happens when you have an authoritarian government, like, by the way, is happening right now. Yeah. Trump's something. And you begin to see your own interests first, right? And the interests of the poor, who cares? cares? Okay. You see it in front of our eyes right now in the American economy. So, how do you get around that? Is a question you might ask.
Yeah.
There's only one way, and that is through extraordinary leadership.
Yeah.
What gave us some reprieve from the worst of this corruption was when Nelson Mandela was president, who said, "I'm giving my salary back to the people," who lived his life of sacrifice in such a way that everybody, even conservative white people, looked up to him. We haven't had that kind of leadership.
Yeah.
Since then. Why must you have a bloated cabinet? You cut the cabinet by half, nothing will happen to this country. Right? But just imagine if you could. Ask yourself this question. Let me stick with education. Ask yourself this question. Why is the Minister of Basic Education boasting that 95%, I forget what the exact number is, of pit littering toilets have been fixed? Do you know what that sounds like? A mother boasting, "Oh, I fed my kids tonight, praise me, or I showed up for work today, What bullshit is that? Okay, that you have to boast about an action that was necessary for the dignity of our people. Is this something to boast about? I'd shut up and just get the job done. You know what I'm saying? But such is our politics. It's opportunistic, it's cutthroat, it's personalized, it's corrupt. And so you begin to depend on ordinary people, actually extraordinary people, to just keep us from falling completely through the floor.
You actually remind me of a friend of mine when we were doing undergrad. Whenever a politician would report on something and they would start clapping in parliament, he would ask, "Why are they clapping? It's expected of him. It's his job. He gets paid for it."
Not just to get paid, he gets paid very well. He's got his own Mercedes-Benz, he's got Blue Light Brigade, he's got a pension, lives in housing that he doesn't have to pay for, unlike us. Why are we applauding? He's right. Your friend is right.
Do you think that if, say for instance, because you said people are still broken, so we can't expect things to change overnight because of historical injustices. We've got young people that are in their 40s now that did not really experience apartheid as the older generation. Do you think that if young people were to form part of government in numbers, we would see changes in the country?
No. Look at the violence wrought on our universities by young people in 2015. They didn't live through apartheid, most of them. But they become like us adults. They become like the communities. They started to see universities as municipal offices, right? And the orgies of violence, right? Visited our universities. Vice chancellors were punched. Buildings went up in flames. People forget that, but we wouldn't talk about it because we were too scared, right? No, the thing about authoritarian racist rule in the past, it's easily carried over to successive generations. Germany is a very good case in point, and then of course South Africa. So even though you weren't there, you behave as if you were there, right? And I've written a book about how the mechanisms by which that happens. So how do you stop it? As I said, through leadership, extraordinary leadership, right? And we don't have that in the country. Okay, and what made the whole very deep was those years in which Zuma was president.
How do we then cultivate that culture of healthy governance? How do we achieve the leadership that you are speaking of?
Well, through each of our institutions, right? Through each and every one of our institutions. So you can't just expect the government to change. You need to make sure that every parent that raises kids raises them in a way that makes them responsible, honest, ethical, and so on and so forth. You're going to make sure that every religious organization, whether Muslim, Christian, Jewish, or no religion, teaches children those important values from the day they were born. You've got to make sure that schools, primary schools, high schools, continue to play that role. But the moment those institutions fail to engender values that we can all agree on, like respecting older people, like not resolving a conflict with violence, like looking up to women. If you don't have all those institutions in sync, okay, then you get the levels of GBV violence that you see today. Then you get the levels of shooting and knifing of your fellow citizens like we see today. So I don't believe this is something that can or should only be resolved at the level of governance, if by that we mean, the state. It has to be resolved in all of our institutions. I mean, I can give you an example. I came in here from speaking at a community library in a poor area this morning. Right? As I come through the gate here, there are about 7 or 8 maybe Black African women, students, singing. Okay. I got a gift, okay, from the talk I did at the library of chocolates, very expensive chocolate. Okay. And I said to these young women, the singing was so amazing, which it wasn't. They actually got sick. Okay. The fact that you were singing in a very white space, okay, I just wanted to give you these chocolates. I can't tell you how happy they were. We need to have moments over and over again in which you do the unexpected. Leadership is about doing that. Good leadership is about doing the unexpected. Okay? When I, as a child of evangelical Christians, go and break bread with a Muslim family who was very poor, I am doing the unexpected. When Madiba walks onto Ellis Park Stadium and all his comrades say, why are you doing this for these white people at the World Cup rugby? He's doing the unexpected. I don't see enough leadership that thinks outside of the box, that takes risks, right? That goes against the grain of social and cultural expectation.
Yeah.
You do that often enough across institutions and you change this country. But you're not going to change it by having a beautiful constitution that has no purchase within communities.
Yeah.
Beautiful policies about gender affirming whatever, without living that, in broad public view. So the way to change this is to change it through exceptional leadership in all of our institutions, and that isn't happening.
So basically, the social justice that we speak so much of is just theoretical at this point.
That's what we're good at it.
Yeah. Another friend of mine often says, you know what, when it comes to academic institutions, they are very good at putting things on paper, and you would see them being listed as top performing institutions. But the moment you get to the university, you would see that it's everything against what has been published.
I think that's correct.
So still sticking on higher education now, we see a lot of chaos in the beginning of the year. I can make an example with the NSFAS funded students. They are always protesting.
Always probably.
The question for me has been, we've had this challenge actually for X number of years, more than a decade. But each and every new season, each and every term, what do you say, semester, in the first term of the first semester, and sometimes the first term of the second semester, we always see protests. What's happening with our leadership in higher education? I would expect leaders there to be a bit better compared to guys higher up in government.
What would you expect them to do?
I don't know. Maybe plan, Prof. We allow students to register.
And who's going to pay my salary?
Do salaries come from the NSFAS money?
No, it comes from student fees, whether it's directly paid or by the state.
But it wouldn't hurt to allow students to be in class for the first or second month, would it?
Just trust me. I've run a university, right? I can assure you, you do that once or twice, and you're going to lay off staff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about so much. Most of the universities are not wealthy. Walter Sisulu is not wealthy. Free State is where I work, was not wealthy. Right? So you're quite right to say, why are we not solving this problem?
Mm.
But you're wrong to assume that that problem is solvable or resolved, can be resolved at the level of the university management.
Mm.
Right? It's not true. The reason those students are protesting is because of a very inefficient and corrupted NSFAS system. So, for example, give you an example. I wrote about this today, by the way, for my Times column tomorrow. I'll be happy to give you the article.
Please.
So you have, I'm going to just take one student that I'm supporting. I'm supporting many, but just take one. The student is food insecure. She can't eat every day.
Yeah.
Okay. She lives right now in the shack. Okay. She says, Prof, NSFA sent me a note saying I've been approved, but I got no money. They said at best I'm going to get my money at the end of April.
Mm.
Now, how does she get from Steenberg and Rebellious, which is near Muizenberg, to Belleville, which is here in the north? Right. Taking a taxi, a train, and a bus. Every single day. Okay. When she can't even eat.
Yeah.
The allowance isn't there. Right? So on paper, she's going to get the money. And in those 2 or 3 months, okay, most of them, not most, many of them drop out. Okay, because it's too hard. So she's dependent on me. Every Monday morning, I give her 400 rand via ETF so that she can buy the tickets for the week.
Yeah.
Right? Then she says to me, Prof, and this was just gave me my 1,000, whatever. But that just about covers my travel. And I'm in a BCom class, I need a financial calculator that costs 900 rand. So I went on my Facebook page, and my friends all gave financial calculator. Now I've got enough to cover many other students. Why must it be, sorry, I don't know of a better word in English, such a sickle? Why must I struggle? Do you know what I'm saying? And so if the university sort of says, oh, we will give all of you the money until this first comes. You can do that for 1 year. You do that for 2 or 3 years, you go bankrupt. Because it's a lot of money. You with me? And then you have to put in administrative systems to recoup the money from the NSFAS. So instead of going to the student, it comes to them. Just trust me, this university can do that. 4-day can't. Even Free State can't. Etc. So when the students protest, it's the wrong address. They should go to Weinberg with the NSFAS officers and the raise hell. It's misguided. It's real. I'm not denying that. But it's the wrong office. You with me? So I have been writing ad nauseum to the NSFAS and saying, solve this problem. You're not dealing with middle class kids. You're dealing with kids for whom even 200, 300 rand a month makes a difference between dropping out and staying
in. And what would be the response?
They don't care. They don't care. You have to understand something that's gone fundamentally wrong in our society. We've reached the point where people in officialdom actually don't care about the poor. I'm so sorry to break this news to you. I mean, ask yourself in what society, and given the ANC's history, can you see Gogos sitting in a SASA line and fainting because of the number of hours? You've seen all the reports. And you don't care about that. You can't devise with all the brain power in this country a system that is more humane? No. Ask yourself what life is in a minute. That you let mentally ill patients die with distended stomachs because they died of hunger because you put them in the care of corrupted private facilities. No, my brother. They don't care about the poor. If you don't get that, you don't understand.
I want to go back a bit. I'm going to reverse. Still on student fees. In, I think it was 2018 that Jacob Zuma stepped down. And then he said, education is now going to be free. What do you think of that statement that education is now going to be free in South Africa. I know it's not happening. It is more accessible, but do you think it's possible to reach a state where education is completely free?
Hmm. So let me just say this about President Zuma. He had rather, these are the English people, he had a rather troubled relationship with money. I don't think he understood the concept of other people's money versus his own money. I don't think he knew what money meant. So he did something that was very irresponsible, which was to say, oh, we're going to have free higher education, right? I mean, all of us in universities sort of said, oh, no. Because even Judge Heffer had said, this is a mistake. The fiscus can't support it, right? So in order to have truly free higher education, you have to change the nature of this economy.
Yeah.
But you can't have a capitalist economy, that's embedded within our society and say there's going to be free higher education, because a capitalist economy works on this notion that somebody pays, okay, for everything, okay. And so even if you give people in this first bursary, it was going to be for a select group of people whose combined household income was below 350,000 rand. In others, it didn't apply. Even if you, as a mother, had 4 kids at university, your whole family lives with you as unemployed, and your husband is in a wheelchair, even then, the threshold amount, okay, means your kid won't be able to survive. I have so many.
Oh yeah.
I have so many cases of that that I have to deal with every day. Okay. So because of this notion, you must pay. Okay. Many children just drop out of the first semester because it's hard. I have relationships with the rural schools to bring them to Stellenbosch University. I can't tell you how many of these kids, no matter how, because I'm not rich. They just can't make it because of the financial situation. So the university found twins from a rural wine farm, very, living together in the same place. They threw them both out. Colours, threw them out. Okay. So in a capitalist economy where somebody has to pay, it's impossible for your education to be free.
Yeah.
Even if you simply have to pay for a calculator, you still your money.
Yeah. Prof, I asked you this question about school education. Now, I want to know, are you happy with the leadership in higher education? You've been a VC at UFS. I think you've held so many, you've worn so many hats across numerous universities, even abroad. If you look at how we govern in our South African universities and where you're an associate or a professor, would you say you are completely happy with how things are done in this country?
In which I'm an academic. I'm supposed to be chronically unhappy.
Chronically unhappy.
I'm paid to be unhappy. No, look, we have some of the best universities in the world. Let me tell you this. The reason we could discover the Omicron variant during the COVID pandemic is because we have some of the best infrastructures. Because of the AIDS pandemic, by the way, and scholars. Olgani Mayos, Slim Karim. My God, we have some amazing scientists, and that's something to be proud of, because I do think we're punching above our weight in the world of scientific enterprise and so on and so forth. So in that sense, our universities are doing fairly well. Most of them, not all. Okay. Where we're not doing very well is trying to solve real problems in our broader community. As my friend John Samuel used to often say at UCT, how can you have a world-class engineering department and every year there's a flood in Khayelitsha that washes away the homes? You're not doing your job.
Yeah.
He's right. You with me? So our ability to connect this incredible science, facilities, infrastructure, expertise to solving some of these real problems is a problem. Okay. I'm in education. I can get in 18 hours a day. I try to use what I've been trained in and what I know to make a difference in schools that have less. if everybody did that in their respective fields, if our economics department actually worked with, small town traders, right, to make them more efficient. If our law department actually offered free legal advice in areas where people are faced with the threat of forced removals because of whatever, just imagine what an impact we would make.
Yeah.
So that's where I think there's a major problem for our universities. I don't think they have made themselves, as a lot of us do good things. Tuli Madunsala does amazing stuff. Pumlaka Bodumadikizada does amazing stuff. My colleague Leslie Swartz does amazing stuff in psychology. But a whole lot of academics, they come, they teach, they take their check, and they go home. Okay. And I think our universities can do more.
Speaking of Prof Matanzela, I have been attending this series of work.
Social justice.
Yes. And they are currently talking about, the center is currently talking about the justice of hunger. Or
Correct.
You've heard that.
No, I participated in that.
Yeah. And they asked a question which I still cannot answer, and perhaps you could help answer it. In the context of higher education, in the context of schools, in the context of everybody else in communities, if you think about this in the context of food alone and the hungry people or the people that cannot afford food, whose duty bearer is it to have them nourished?
It's the relevant government. This is true in all countries, right? Whether you have a capitalist or socialist economy, it doesn't matter. Your job is to make sure that the people in your country can eat, right? It's a very basic human need, right? And we're not very good at that. So what you have in this gap left by government is you have the private sector. You have, at this lively woman got up, and every day in Belhar, she feeds many, many people who wouldn't otherwise eat out of her own pocket. You know what I'm saying? So you take gift of the givers. Just imagine you had no gift of the givers here. How many people would suffer even more? Okay. So, but again, as I said, in the system, you need a government that works. So the primary responsibility, I still believe, a university, and this we did at the Free State, by the way, can solve this problem on the campus. We discovered that I think almost 60% of our students were food insecure. What did we do? I launched the No Student Hungry campaign with my colleagues and some outside people. And we made sure that every student, could eat at least 3 times a day. Okay, we raised the money. All my talks, I put the money into that program and that kind of thing. So, on the one hand, I think government should provide that overarching capacity for everybody to eat, especially in times of high unemployment and so on. But I also think institutions like universities, churches, and so on should all play their role, whether it's soup kitchens or whatever the case might be. The Muslim community does this very well, by the way.
Yeah.
In terms of their own, but also others. Where I live now, there's a guy that it's actually beautiful to watch. Every Sunday he makes pots and pots of apparently very delicious curries, and the cars line up sometimes for miles, and people pay for them. When everybody is gone, you see another group of people coming from Hanover Park, from Lanka, from all these places, and he gives them the taste of the food for free. Right? That's my South Africa, right there.
When you say it's government that has to ensure that people are fed, I'm reminded of President Ramaphosa's very first SONA when he said, our duty is not necessarily to do things for you. Our duty is to create an enabling environment. So the follow-up question to that, to what you just said, would be, in what manner do they do that?
Look, in theory is right? In theory, if you make sure that you create the enabling jobs for high investment in this country, so that there are jobs in which people can earn a decent wage, then of course it works perfectly. Because then I don't have to feed you. I'm giving you a job, right? That old story, teach a man how to fish, and so on. But the reality is sitting where there's high levels of unemployment. What do I do in the meantime? Got to feed people.
Yeah.
And unless you've been hungry, were you ever hungry in your life where there was no food?
Unfortunately not. I grew up in a rural area, so we always had food in the garden.
Let me tell you, it wasn't often, but I remember there were moments. It is the most horrible of pains. You must rather stab me and I can eat it. But when you have a pain injury, you feel dejected. You feel somebody doesn't care about you. You feel emotionally, distraught. Nobody should be hungry. And in a country with the relative wealth that we have, it's unconscionable.
Hopefully someday we will get there.
Oh well,
We'll
someday
get
Jesus will come. I mean, we can make all these things, but in the moment, we've got to serve our people.
Prof, thank you very much. I truly appreciate your time.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you.
Now we're going back to square one, making fire.